Today I want to talk to you about an unpopular subject, or it seems to be unpopular in church circles. But I get asked the question, and I hear the question quite a bit, why would a loving God send people to the lake of fire? And you go to church, if you go to a church on Sunday morning, they teach you that God loves everybody. And God loves the world, and God loves the wicked, and God loves the sinner but hates the sin. That's what you get. But what does God say about the matter? Because ultimately, that's what's important. It's not about what a man setting himself up as the Antichrist says, and I'm talking about a pastor. It's about what God says. So let's talk about for a minute just what God says on the matter. God says that He hates all workers of iniquity. Now, we know iniquity is sin. Now, if He hates all workers of iniquity, that means He hates somebody. Because if it's like it's taught in church circles that God loves the sinner but hates the sin, then He would say, I hate the iniquity of workers. Wouldn't He? But what God is saying is that He hates the workers of iniquity, which means He hates those that work sin, that live in sin. God also says that He hates a lot of other things and a lot of other people. But the bottom line is God hates His enemies. Now let's go to the Old Testament. Yes, we're in a new covenant, but it's still the same God. Where was the love for Egypt when God drowned them in the Red Sea? Where was the love for Jericho when the walls came down? Where was the love for the Pharisees when Jesus said, you are of your father the devil, and his works you will do? Where was the love for Sodom and Gomorrah when God rained fire and brimstone down on them and destroyed them? If you want to call that love, that's up to you. But I think that very clearly defines that God hates His enemies. In John, we read about Jesus being the true vine and the genuinely born-again believers being the branches. But He says, if you don't abide in Me and you don't continue in Me, then you can't bear fruit. And if you don't bear fruit, then My Father, who's the husbandman or the gardener, is going to come along and He's going to pluck that branch out and He's going to throw it in a pile to be burned. God hates all workers of iniquity. God hates His enemies. So the answer to the question, why would a loving God send someone to the lake of fire, is very simple. God wouldn't send anybody He loves to the lake of fire. But He would send His enemies there. He would. He'd send His enemies there. And we know that the lake of fire was created for Satan and his angels. And we know that those who have not received Christ and truly, genuinely been born again are already under the wrath of God. The judgment of God is on them. So the next time you think about the question, why would a loving God send the ones He loves to the lake of fire? He won't. God has called out a remnant for His own. In the Old Testament, He called out the Israelites. In the New Testament, as we're grafted in to the Jewish heritage, we become what I like to call spiritual Israel. But there's a group of people that God has called from the foundation of the world to be conformed to the image of Jesus Christ. Those are the ones ones that He loves. Those are the ones that nothing, neither depth nor height, nor width, nor anything can separate them from the love of God. Those are the ones that all things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to His purpose. As far as His enemies, they're going to be burned. Now you can't really see it, but there's a pile of sticks and branches and wood and just piled up back here behind me. Here's the deal. Just like this will someday be burned, so will God's enemies. So will the world. So will those calling themselves Christians but are very, very far away from God and don't have an intimate relationship with Him. The only ones that will avoid the execution of being burnt alive is those that are genuinely called and drawn by the Father through the Spirit to be conformed to the image of Christ. So does God love everybody? Does God love the world? Absolutely not. God hates His enemies. And He will get justice in the end. Until next time, to the genuinely born-again believers in Jesus Christ, God bless.